We first traveled to Portugal 35 years ago, and we've been coming back regularly ever since. Over the course of hundreds of trips, we've seen visitors fall into the same traps, mistakes that can really take away from the experience. In this video, we'll share the most common pitfalls and, more importantly, how you can avoid them so you can make the most of your time in Portugal. Hola, tudo bem? Hello and welcome to the channel where we want you to be happier traveling through Spain and Portugal. I am Tony, born in Spain, and together with Cecilia, born in Brazil but with a Portuguese passport, we have a very special connection with Portugal. We've grouped the mistakes we are going to talk about into a few big categories. Mistakes when preparing your trip, mistakes related to transportation, mistakes around food, and finally, the things people get wrong once they are already in Portugal. So let's dive straight into them. Let's start with something that might sound controversial. You've probably heard that Portugal is one of Europe's incredibly cheap destinations. Well, that used to be true, but not anymore. As we mentioned at the beginning, we've been traveling around Portugal for the last 35 years, and we have seen the major changes firsthand. What was once a true bargain is now much more expensive, especially in Lisbon and Porto. Accommodation, transport and meals have risen sharply in the last decade. Sure, you can still find a coffee for under €1, but in the past it was everywhere under €1, and now those places are getting rarer. And if you think hotels in Lisbon are expensive compared to other European capitals, you are definitely not alone. Never mind eating out. Today, a meal at a restaurant in Lisbon can cost more than in Madrid or Barcelona, something unthinkable 10 years ago. And just to give you another example, in Madrid, the cheapest metro ride a visitor can buy today costs 73 cents. In Barcelona, €1.25. And in Lisbon, the same ride will set you back €1.66. The good news, this price phenomenon is mostly limited to the country's tourist magnets. As soon as you escape from the big cities, you will find Portugal is still quite affordable and you'll get to enjoy a more authentic experience at the same time. And from one common misconception to another, let's talk about size, because Portugal is bigger than most travelers expect. At first glance, Portugal looks small, especially if you compare it to neighboring Spain. With a population of just over 10 million, it can seem like a tiny, easy-to-manage destination. But appearances are deceiving. Within this relatively compact territory, there is an incredible diversity of culture, history, landscapes, beaches, and gastronomy. From the historic streets of Porto and Lisbon to the vineyards of the Douro Valley, the dramatic cliffs of the Algarve, and the quiet villages of the Alentejo, Portugal has enough to keep you exploring for years. So yes, Portugal may be smaller than many European countries, but don't make the mistake of thinking you can see it all in a single trip. Even seasoned travelers find there's always something new to discover. So plan wisely and be ready to come back. Every single time we return to Portugal, we make wonderful discoveries. And that after 4 decades of travel. And there's not just continental Portugal. The islands are absolutely extraordinary, and forgetting them is our next mistake. Lisbon, Porto, the Algarve or the Alentejo are top of mind for many travelers. But not everyone remembers that Portugal has 2 extraordinary island groups far from the mainland. Madeira in Portuguese, and the Azores, are truly unique destinations, completely different from anything you will find on the continent. If you research them, you might discover they can provide some of the most unforgettable trips in the country. Our trip to San Miguel in the Azores before we had the channel is certainly one trip we will never forget. So we've got a country that's bigger than it looks, plus spectacular islands in the middle of the Atlantic. And that brings us to the next common mistake. One of the biggest mistakes travelers make is trying to see too much in too little time. Portugal may look small on the map, but between the mainland cities, towns, countryside, and even the islands, there's an incredible amount to explore. Rushing from one place to another means you'll only scratch the surface and miss the atmosphere, the local flavors, and the hidden gems that make the country so special. Plan realistically. Give yourself enough days in each region to enjoy it properly, whether that's wandering the streets of Porto, tasting wines anywhere in the country, or soaking up the sun along the Algarve. Our recommendation: don't spend less than 6 days in Lisbon and at least 4 in Porto. That way you will have time to truly soak in each city, enjoy the neighborhoods at a relaxed pace, and discover some of the less obvious treasures that most tourists miss. And once you've covered the cities, you move on to the interior, the coast, and the islands. And that brings us to the next mistake: sticking only to the classic destinations we have just mentioned and missing out on the rest of what Portugal has to offer. One of the most common mistakes travelers make is sticking to the big three: Lisbon, Porto, and the Algarve. They are beautiful and they absolutely deserve to be on your list. But if you limit your trip to only these places, you're missing out on so much of what Portugal has to offer. There are smaller cities like Coimbra, with one of the oldest universities in Europe, Évora, where Roman ruins meet whitewashed Alentejo charm, or Guimarães, known as the birthplace of the nation. Then there's the Douro Valley with its vineyards, the Minho with its green landscapes and traditions, and dozens of walled towns and villages that feel like stepping back in time. Never mind the beautiful islands we mentioned earlier. These places are quieter, more authentic, and often more affordable than the main tourist hubs. They are also where you will find a Portugal that hasn't been shaped by mass tourism yet. So yes, visit Lisbon, Porto, and the Algarve, but don't stop there. Give yourself the chance to discover the rest of the country and you'll have a much richer experience. Portugal isn't just diverse in culture and landscapes, there is another diversity, which will be the subject of our next mistake. The weather in Portugal is diverse, and that's where a lot of travelers get caught off guard. Many people arrive expecting endless sunshine, but Portugal has 4 well-marked seasons. Winters, especially in the north, can be wet and chilly. Spring is unpredictable. Some days are warm and sunny, others bring rain. Summers are hot, especially inland, while the coast can feel cooler thanks to the Atlantic winds. And fall often mixes sunny spells with sudden showers. On top of this, the climate changes from region to region. Porto and the north see much more rain, the Algarve is dry and sunny most of the year, and Lisbon often sits somewhere in between. And don't forget the Atlantic. The ocean is cold year-round, even in August, and currents can be strong. So the key is: don't pack as if Portugal had one single climate. Plan your wardrobe and activities according to both the region and the season you're traveling in. And that includes your footwear. For weather reasons, of course, but also for something typically Portuguese that can have a huge impact on your trip. if you don't prepare for it. Many Portuguese towns and cities are famous for their calçada portuguesa, those beautiful but irregular stone pavements. They look fantastic, but they are not exactly practical. Walking in high heels in Lisbon, Porto, or almost anywhere else can quickly turn into a nightmare. Flip-flops aren't great either, especially if you are climbing hills or walking on slippery stones after a bit of rain. Dragging a suitcase across these pavements can completely destroy its wheels in no time. So good walking shoes and a bit of planning go a long way toward making your trip much more comfortable. And since we're talking about proper footwear, it's not just your feet you should be worried about. Your legs and even your heart need to be ready for the endless climbs you'll face in Portugal's hillier cities. Lisbon and Porto, the two main destinations, are famously built on steep terrain, but they are not alone. Coimbra and plenty of smaller towns will also test your stamina. What looks like a short walk on the map can quickly turn into a workout of stairs and sloping cobblestones. For some travelers, this constant up and down can really stretch physical limits. The solution? Arrive in at least basic shape and be realistic about your own pace, especially in the summer heat. Pro tip: don't feel you need to conquer every hill on foot. Lisbon's historic trams, elevators and funiculars aren't just picturesque. They save your energy for when you really want it. And if you know steep streets will be a challenge, book accommodation closer to areas of the city where there are no slopes. Your legs will thank you, and so will your travel companion when you are not grumpy halfway up a climb. And speaking of planning, there's something else you'll definitely want to prepare for before your trip to Portugal: Mondays. And that is because many national monuments and museums close on that day. Some of the most popular attractions do open every day, but plenty of them don't. So it really pays to check beforehand. Otherwise, you might find yourself walking across town all excited, only to be greeted by a padlocked door. Not the kind of memory you want from your trip. And while we're on the subject of attractions, another smart move is to book some tickets in advance. That way you don't waste time queuing or risk missing out entirely. To be honest with you, in Portugal there aren't too many critical attractions where booking your ticket in advance is absolutely essential. Nothing comparable to Spain's Alhambra in Granada or the Sagrada Familia in Barcelona. But wherever is required, it is highly advisable to book the tickets in advance. Probably the most important case is the Pena Palace in Sintra, one of the most popular day trips from Lisbon, where a strictly enforced system of time slots is in place. Another place to watch out for is the St. George's Castle in Lisbon. If you don't have the Lisbon card, it's wise to book your entrance in advance to avoid long waits at the ticket office. And with that, we wrap up the preparing for your trip mistakes. Now, let's move on to transportation, an area where many visitors go wrong. And the most common mistake we see, you will find out next. In cities like Lisbon or Porto, renting a car is more of a burden than a help. Parking is scarce and expensive, streets can be narrow and tricky to navigate, and traffic is often more stressful than liberating. Still, many travelers instinctively book a rental car for their entire trip, thinking it will give them more freedom. In reality, unless you are planning to head into rural areas, the mountains, the interior, or the islands, a car will likely sit unused while costing you money. And if you do decide to rent, keep in mind automatic cars are limited and may be more expensive in Portugal, so you'll want to book early. Otherwise, you may end up with a manual transmission, whether you like it or not. For city-based travel, you really don't need a car. Portugal's cities have excellent public transportation, and even many day trips are easier and cheaper using that very same public transportation. And that brings us straight to the next mistake, not being familiar with Portugal's public transport system. In many Portuguese cities, towns and villages, you'll get around almost entirely on foot. But in the largest cities, when you need to cover longer distances, you'll quickly discover a wide variety of public transport options. Buses, trams, metro, suburban trains, funiculars, cable cars, and even boats. In Lisbon, especially, public transport is more than just a way of getting from A to B. It's part of the travel experience. The striking design of its metro stations, the charming old streetcars still rattling through the streets, and the funiculars climbing the city's steep hillsides are attractions in their own right. So don't overlook them and make sure you learn how the system works before you arrive. It will save you both time and money. Don't be that tourist who pays over €6 to ride the Santa Justa lift in Lisbon when savvy travelers do exactly the same for just €1.66. And while we're talking about getting around cities, there's another option that visitors often misunderstand or misuse: ride-sharing services. That's our next mistake. In Portugal, ride-sharing services are known as TVDE, and the two big players are Bolt and Uber. Both operate in many Portuguese destinations and provide a very similar service. Here's the good news: ride-sharing is one of the few things in Portugal that's genuinely affordable compared to other European countries. For groups of 2, 3 or 4 people, taking an Uber can sometimes be cheaper than buying individual metro or bus tickets. And it's not just for quick city hops. Ride-sharing can be incredibly useful for day trips too, whether it's moving between attractions in Sintra or getting a lift up to the fortress in Setúbal without breaking a sweat. So if you overlook ride-sharing, you may end up spending more money and effort than necessary. And from our list of transportation mistakes to the potential pitfalls when it comes to food, let's dive into those next. Landing in Portugal hungry at the wrong time is a classic rookie mistake. Most cafes open early for a light breakfast, but lunch service generally runs from around midday to just after 2 p.m. and many kitchens close afterwards, reopening for dinner around 7:30, 8 p.m. Locals tend to eat dinner later than in other countries, so walking in at 6 p.m. can mean empty rooms or closed doors. Plan your big meals around the local time frames and use mid-morning or afternoon snacks. Pastelerias are perfect for this to bridge the gaps. Tourist zones and shopping malls sometimes serve all day, but beyond those pockets, expect set meal windows. To avoid disappointment, check opening hours online, book popular restaurants in advance, and keep a backup cafe pinned nearby. Next up is a mistake that probably causes more annoyed customers in Portugal than any other: not understanding the couvert. I know it's not a courtesy of the house. If you've ever sat down at a Portuguese restaurant and found a small plate of bread, olives or cheese on your table, that's the couvert. Unlike in some countries where this might be free, in Portugal each item is priced individually. Bread is usually cheap, but cheese, cured meats or other items can be noticeably more expensive. By law, the price of each item included in the couvert must appear on the menu, so you always have the chance to see what you're being offered before it reaches the table. Many travelers assume it's complimentary and are surprised when it appears on the bill. The good news is you can choose what you want. We personally almost always accept the bread, which is usually excellent in Portugal. And if olives turn up, there's someone here on our team who genuinely loves them. If you don't want any of the items, just let the waiter know when he brings them to the table. If he places them anyway, leave them in a corner and don't touch them. And always check the bill at the end of the meal to make sure it matches what you actually ate. The next mistake is all about where you choose to eat. If a restaurant has big signs outside showing glossy photographs of every dish, chances are it's designed mainly for tourists. Sometimes the food isn't terrible, but it's rarely outstanding and you can be sure you'll be overcharged. Genuine local restaurants don't need to advertise the dishes with photos. The quality speaks for itself, the prices are fairer. And if it's a local restaurant, you are likely to find Portugal's national dish on the menu. Don't ignore it. Even if you are not a big fan of fish, it would be a mistake to visit Portugal without exploring the countless codfish recipes, or bacalhau, as the Portuguese call it. Codfish isn't just another recipe, it's a central part of Portuguese culture, woven into the country's culinary, cultural, and even religious identity. For centuries, salt-preserved cod fed sailors on long Atlantic voyages and became a staple across the country, especially inland where fresh fish was scarce. It's central to family traditions and Catholic observances like Christmas Eve and Lent. Locals proudly say there are hundreds of ways to cook it, one for every day of the year. Today, from humble taskas to fine dining, bacalhau, codfish, remains a shared language of memory, creativity, and national pride. Learn about the most famous recipes, and in our video on what to eat in Lisbon, we highlight several so you know what to choose when you encounter them. And once you've enjoyed your codfish, here comes another very common pitfall. Tipping in Portugal is very different from what many travelers expect, especially those coming from America. And it works exactly the same way as in Spain. No matter what you read or see on other YouTube videos, we've seen videos talking about 5%, 10% percentage. That's absolutely nonsense. Tipping in Portugal is always seen as a reward for exceptional service and is not mandatory. If you want to go the local way, you will rarely tip. Many visitors automatically calculate a large tip, thinking it is expected, but locals will often give just a small token or nothing at all, and no one cares. Over-tipping won't get you better service, it just means you've spent more than necessary. And there's more. There's been a seismic change since the pandemic regarding tipping. With the ever-growing presence of electronic payments, the volume of tips being handed out has hugely shrunk. Many people don't carry cash anymore, and in Portugal, you cannot add a tip to your card payment. So remember, check the bill, round sensibly should you wish to, and save your extra euros for another cake or a coffee at a terrace. And speaking of desserts, here goes our next mistake. Pastéis de nata, custard tarts, are everywhere and have become a sort of national symbol. You can hardly walk a block without passing by a shop selling the delicacy. At times, the presence of pastéis de nata can even feel overwhelming. It wasn't always that way. There was a time where you knew where to go if you wanted a good pastel de nata, and that was the place, that was it. Granted, a good pastel de nata, along with a cup of coffee, is a terrific sweet treat. We love them. When we fly back home, we always take heaps of them to share happiness with friends and family. But believe us, there is life beyond the pastel de nata. Portuguese desserts are so rich and diverse that it even feels unfair to witness the position of absolute dominance the custard tart has acquired. So don't get us wrong. Get your dose of pastéis de nata by all means, but venture beyond. Every destination has its own typical local sweet. Make sure you try them, you might discover an unexpected favorite. And follow my example, whenever there's Molotov in the menu, I never ever fail to order it. Having dealt with food, our final block of mistakes is related to pitfalls committed while in Portugal. Portugal is a very safe country with some of the lowest crime rates in the Western world. As a result, many tourists lower their guard and fall prey to the ever-present pickpockets. They operate wherever there are tourists, so be very careful in crowded places, in queues at attractions, in restaurants and on public transport, especially on trams, on streetcars frequented by tourists. The basic advice is always carry your ID, money and mobile phone out of reach of thieves, preferably in an inside pocket and always close to your body. Also, if possible, avoid taking public transport with large suitcases. A person who has to look after themselves, the bags they carry and their belongings is a prime target for pickpockets. With pickpockets out of the way, here comes another very important mistake. This is a common trap for Spanish speakers traveling in Portugal and also for others that have Spanish as a second language, and it is assuming everyone will understand Spanish. Sure, Portuguese and Spanish share similarities, but they are distinct languages. While more Portuguese speak Spanish than Spaniards speak Portuguese, you cannot assume that everyone in Portugal will understand your Spanish. On top of that, using Spanish as a default can sometimes come across as dismissive or lazy. Locals may feel you didn't make the effort to speak their language. We are not saying your knowledge of Spanish won't often save the day. It will. But we recommend you start with a Portuguese greeting and then, if needed, switch to Spanish or English. In fact, most Portuguese under 50 speak English remarkably well. If you've traveled in Spain, you might be surprised at the difference. This is partly due to extensive exposure to English language on TV and partly because Portuguese is a phonetically complex language while Spanish is much simpler. So by greeting in Portuguese first, you will avoid the lazy tourist impression and earn a smile before switching languages. So you might already guess the next mistake we're going to talk about, right? Making a small effort in Portuguese is like opening a door to better interactions. People are usually patient and helpful, but a little Portuguese will take you a long way. Just six phrases for you to learn. Olá, hello, bom dia, good morning, boa tarde, good afternoon, boa noite, good evening, good night, obrigado or obrigada if you're a woman, thank you, and se faz favor, please. It's not a great effort and the results will be highly rewarding. Shops are one place where you can test your basic Portuguese skills, but there's one kind of shop you should definitely approach with caution. If you spot a store with lavish window displays, polished interiors and rows of beautifully packaged authentic Portuguese products, from cheese-filled codfish cakes to designer cans of sardines, you've likely walked into a tourist trap. Prices here are inflated well beyond what locals would ever pay. That doesn't mean you should skip codfish cakes or tinned fish altogether. Far from it, they are part of the country's culinary heritage and worth sampling. Just seek them out in traditional bakeries, tascas, or local grocery stores instead. The taste will be just as good, if not better, and your wallet will thank you. And that's it, the most common mistakes travelers make in Portugal and how to avoid them. Avoid these mistakes and your trip to Portugal will be remembered for all the right reasons. Now that you know what not to do, it's time to focus on what you should do to make the most of your journey. On the screen you will see now the list of the most important videos we have dedicated to Portugal on the channel. Plenty of information to help you prepare the perfect trip to the country. We are waiting for you from now on those videos.